Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for joining me here and now as we merge our consciousnesses together. Whoever you are, wherever you are, we're connecting now to anyone and everyone who watches this video. And I really felt like making a video as I prepared to journey tomorrow, first thing early, and I thought, okay, what wants to be expressed through my vessel? And I remembered that one of the things I've really wanted to do for a long time is share this work known as the Terra Papers by Robert Morning Sky. And it's a free PDF that you can find online. I'm not sure if there's a way to get a physical copy somehow, but this book really neutralized so much for me when I read it, of just reading about this whole Earth story in a way that is like reading a children's book. And it helped me really let go of a lot of fear, anger, frustration, a lot of feelings that I had, because I could just read it from the perspective of, say, an extraterrestrial or a star civilization that is outside of our realm, looking at it from a distance, and what would they see? So I just want to read a section of this, and perhaps this will be a little mini series, and you can just enjoy the written words of Robert Morning Sky. So let me just go ahead and get started. So, the Terra Papers by Robert Morning Sky. We are not alone. The astronomers are wrong. The scientists are wrong. They are here, but we cannot see them because they hide. They hide in plain sight. We are their servants. We are their slaves. We are their property. We are theirs. I will avoid commentary, but I just want to say that that's not true now. But okay, that's the only comment I'll make, I promise. I just want to point that out, that we don't need to be anyone's slaves. We don't belong to them. We're not their servants. We're not their slaves. But anyway, okay, continuing. In time, the star being would come to trust the six. By using a small crystal to create images, the visitor began to communicate with the young men. Calling him the Star Elder, the youths sat at the knee of their friend, examining all of the crystalline images with great care, piecing together the incredible history of our solar system and mankind itself. Star Elder's message was simple. Star beings have been here since Earth was a barren rock. They were here when man was created and have been here throughout his evolution. In some cases, their involvement was benevolent. In some cases, it was not. Man has been guided and he has been misled. The star beings have been our gods and our devils. They have always been here, and they are still here now. When pressed to explain his presence on Earth, the Star Elder stunned the six. There was a war in the skies above. His ship had been downed by enemy forces. I am called Morning Sky, Robert Morning Sky. My grandfather was one of the 6 young Indian rescuers. When I was young, my grandfather told me the story about his star visitor. He and his friends called him Star Elder, a name given out of respect. But as time passed, his name was revealed to the youths. He was called Bekti. This is his story and mine. In the late 60s, I was enrolled at a university in a religious studies program. Towards the end of my studies, I submitted a paper that briefly summarized the history of man and Earth as told by Bekti. I titled the paper Terra, a hidden history of planet Earth. I was sure I had presented a well-researched and well-documented work. It was immediately labeled a work of outrageous, if not blasphemous, distortion of historical records and not of the caliber of a serious student of religion. The Terra Papers, the story of Bekti, nearly got me thrown out of school. In frustration, I approached a UFO organization and some UFO researchers reasonably confident that they would be most interested in my story. To my surprise, I was rejected offhand. I was advised by one researcher that UFOs were quite clearly a phenomena of a technology and not the works of the mythical beings of primitive peoples. Curiously, he is now a well-respected UFO author and has recently released a book on the ET Native American connection. For 30 years, I have avoided telling the story. The initial response to my efforts was discouraging, but I have recently been persuaded to try again. The history of man and earth presented by Bekti is both exciting and frightening. The creation of man and his place in the galaxy is made clear, but in the process his nobility and his pride will be injured. The abduction phenomena and the attending gray beings are revealed to have been integral parts of man's history, but are explained against the framework of the purposes of the star beings for mankind. The sources of man's religions and the origins of legendary figures like Zeus, the Minotaur, Osiris, and Isis, and a number of other mythological beings are explained and also placed into the framework of the history of planet Earth. And so too, upcoming events can be predicted, not from any psychic abilities or channeling, but from patterns of an ongoing effort to direct planet Earth. Man will soon be surrounded with images of asteroids and falling fiery comets. Black pigs will be seen everywhere, as will angel figures. Dinosaurs will become children's heroes, and violence will be the foundation of their play. New airborne diseases, immune to existing treatments, will surface. NASA will be rendered weak and impotent, if not terminated. A galactic war of conquest rages over our heads. Earth and man is the prize. This is my story, this is my grandfather's story, and this is the story of Bekti. Genesis. The explosion rocked the nothingness of the void. Primordial essence was thrown violently outward. Like a primeval ocean, wave after wave crashed out into the black pit of the void. Nothingness beheld chaos. Chaos poured out into nothingness. As the primeval waters streamed outwards, rivers of dark essence swirled together, forming huge whirlpools. As the whirlpools spun inwards, the essence condensed into clouds of gas. Superheated from the compression forces in the core of the swirl, sparks ignited the volatile clouds. Explosion after explosion formed enormous balls of fire, supernovas of brilliant red and dwarf stars of blazing blue. Like islands in the waters of essence, the stars formed from the swirls in the spinning galaxies. Time after time, the process was repeated in the void. Time after time, a galaxy was born. In time, one of these galaxies would come to be known as Eridanus. This is a history of one small part of Eridanus and a tiny world known to us as Earth. Show the little picture here. In the swirling primordial waters of Eridanus, many of the stars gave birth to worlds of their own. From the gases and dust thrown out from the suns, the planets condensed and cooled. Elemental gases combined to form moisture. The rain fell to form oceans. Thunderstorms raged. The oceans tossed and turned, crashing on the shores of the surface lands. In the midst of the lightning and fury, a single spark flashed, creating in 1 microsecond a single cell of life. Single-celled life forms combined to create multi-celled creatures. Multi-celled creatures became complex beings with billions of cells: fishes, insects, birds, reptiles, plants, and mammals. As many different creatures as there are stars in the galaxy came into existence. And in time, humanoids evolved. Fish humanoids, bird humanoids, reptile humanoids, mammal humanoids, and humanoids of every kind became the consistent outcome of evolution. As primordial Eridanus man developed, his caves gave way to huts. Gathering of huts became settlements. Settlements became cities. The trapping and hunting of animals gave way to fur trading. Fur trading gave way to markets. Gathering gave birth to gardening. Gardening yielded to farming. The needs of Eridanus man became desires. Desires became greed. Compassionate men became leaders. Leaders became conquerors, and a primitive world became civilized. Differences of opinion became arguments. Arguments became wars. Curiosity and necessity gave birth to technology. Early Eridanus man had conquered his world. And then Eridanus man looked up into the skies, and he saw his moon. He created ships to carry him skyward, and his conquest of the moon began. As he stood on the moon, as he surveyed the lunar cities, he looked up and saw the stars above him. Seeking more, he moved skyward again. This time, neighboring worlds were discovered. Eridanus man conquered the environment of the new world, and the cycle began again. And so it was that Eridanus man met his relatives in the galaxy. Eridanus bird man met Eridanus mammal man. Eridanus reptile man met Eridanus insect man. And an Eridanus reptile man greeted them all. The many evolved beings of the worlds of Eridanus gathered and talked. They traded, they danced, they shared, and they joined together. In time, they learned from each other, and they lived together. And they went to war. Primitive Eridanus man had become a civilized Eridanus man. Primitive war gave way to the science of war. Death in all its horror became a tool of progress. Galactic kingdoms in Eridanus rose and fell. Civilizations prospered and died. A continuous series of wars engulfed the entire galaxy. No single empire endured for long. None save one. Here's the picture. In the galaxy of Eridanus, the way of things became war, violence, and turbulence. Surfacing above other races as the supreme masters of war, the beings, so called because of the hissing sound they made as they spoke, weathered war and chaos to seize and retain a sizable portion of the 9th sector of the galaxy. Though originally ruled over by kings of repute, it was under the SSS queens that the empire was to reach its pinnacle. Known as the the queens and their techniques of rule became the very embodiment of royal power. The very name for a throne, ast, would be chilling tribute to the deadliness of the reptilian queens. In a galaxy of chaos and war, the beings had no peer or competition. Ruthless in command and efficient in their cruelty, the SSST queens were brilliant politicians and war strategists, using events to advantage and manipulating wars to their advantage and gain. Providing the royals with the power to conquer and reign over their foes was a powerful military force, unmatched and unequaled by any other. Comprised of tall, imposing figures, the SSS warriors were cold-blooded warriors with frightening, dragon-like faces. Though evolution had long since removed their scale-like skins, the plates on the body armor gave an impression of fierce dinosaur beings. Only a long ridge of bone rising from the forehead and trailing back over the head remained to hint at their reptilian ancestry. Known as the MK or MG, the appearance of the SSS warriors alone was enough to strike fear into an opponent's heart. Countless wars over billions of years had taught the SSS queens a vital lesson. An enemy or rebellious subject serves no purpose if executed. But if the brain was reprogrammed, resistance was eliminated, and an able body was added to the labor force. Mind control was the SSST science of choice. Referred to by other races as the Ari, or masters, in time they would become known as the Ari of On, heaven, or the Ari On. Today it is known as Orion. But though it had become the epitome of power and might, a symbol of brutal rulership and unrelenting aggression, the fates would play a curious trick on Ari On. In their quest for galactic power, the SSS-T warriors had looted the palace treasuries of their victimized worlds. The cultural riches of conquered worlds were placed on display in the museums of Arion, making the empire the center of Ninth Sector culture and wisdom. Arion became the showcase world for poetry and music, art and dance. It was a step, however unknowingly, for the evolution of temperance in the SSST psyche. Here's a small graphic and many different words. If you're interested in seeing this, you can just pause it and look at the many words and connections that Robert Morning Sky has put here in this on this page. The Asa-Ur Empire. Though the reign of the SSST queens on the Ninth Sector was seldom challenged, of great concern to the Arion queens were the movements and expansions of yet another race called RRR. Evolved from vicious mammalian predators, the were still in the early stages of development. Their thirst for expansionism unburdened by the softening that continual wars and time brought on. For the RRR race, war was the entirety of existence. All else was meaningless. Life itself meant obedience and total commitment to the RRR kings. Anything less meant death. So quickly did they create their empire, so ruthless were their techniques, that the RRR would become known as Asa, or overlords. In the Ninth Sector, the worlds of the RRR would be known as Asa-Ur. Led by the fearsome Iku warriors, a barbaric army with a fleet of deadly starships of overwhelming firepower. The kings of Asa-Ur wreaked havoc on the worlds surrounding the ninth passageway. The elite Iku forces descended on their unsuspecting targets with unmerciful and unrelenting attack, clearing the skyways of any potential resistance and totally decimating land-based strongholds. Within moments, warrior ground forces, the Bay, moved in to annihilate any and all remaining military forces. Renowned for their practice of devouring the flesh of their enemies, the Iku and Bay became known as the DK or TK, the teeth of the RRR. Aggressive and ravenous, unrelenting in their expansion, the RRR Conqueror Kings began the slow, methodical takeover of the Peshme 10, the ninth passageway, a critical star lane. Seizing the passageway would give the Asa-Ur kings control of travel into and out of the Aryan Empire, and that possibility was one of the SSS-T queens. Okay, that possibility was one the queens could not permit. Here he has an image of the Bay and the Iku. And here are more words and their connections to words that we're familiar with. But the Asa-Ur kings were a formidable power. The ways of war had been the driving force of their evolution. Every king had demanded much of their military forces. The starship pilots, the Iku, possessed light beams which could melt targets, cut them to pieces, or disintegrate them. The elite ground forces, the Bay, used weapons which could emit sounds that stunned the enemy, disintegrated solid objects, or could be used to transport an object from one place to another. All in all, the Doc forces had in a short time become an army of devastating power. The Asa-Ur science of war was a technology of death called At. And from this new science, the ultimate warship was spawned. A planet-sized globe with all the armaments of all other starships. And more, the warship was dubbed the the RR, or ARR. A miniature world capable of a destruction never before seen in the ninth sector. The R of Doc forces made the Empire a force to be reckoned with. The rays of the sun glistening off the surface of the death ship made the R shine like a bright star in the skies. Though a brilliant star was often a portent of wondrous things, this star brought death and destruction. As the Asa-Ur kings continued to expand their holdings, the SSS-T queens made a careful gesture of peace towards the conquering kings in the hopes of resolving the dilemma before war became necessary. The billions of years of conflict had taught the SSS-T an invaluable lesson. War brings death to a winner as well as a loser. There were other ways to win the conflict. Victory was, in some cases, gained by taking the enemy into one's own folds. The Doc could be won over in a more clever and devious way. The queens of Aryan called for a meeting of royals. If the kings of Asa-Ur pledged their loyalty to the SSS-T high throne and submitted themselves to the service of the throne, then they would be granted control of the outer stars of the ninth sector. Realizing the magnitude of power in the offer extended, The Asa kings quickly agreed to the alliance. The Doc forces and mighty Death Planet were placed in the service of the SSST queens. The outer ninth sector was made part of the Asa Empire. Catapulted to a place as superpower by the alliance, the stars of Asa became known as the Empire of SSS-T, RRR.SSS-T. Empire born of the SSS-T, dying for the SSST, or SSRRSS, Sirius. With the Arian alliance to back them, the Asa kings began yet a greater effort to conquer and seize new systems, new worlds to add to their empire. Solidifying their power, levying heavy tolls and embargoes on travelers on the lanes of the Ninth Passageway, the Empire had soon become the Okay, that sentence isn't finished. The Aryan queens watched with a wary eye. The moment of betrayal must be carefully planned. And so, for a time, a tenuous peace came to exist between the two thrones. All was well until the era of the monarch known as the Great An, the elder king of Asa Here's another graphic with these ancient words and their connection to words that we are familiar with today. You can feel free to pause and enjoy the wisdom there. Okay. In the era of the great elder king An, life on Asa was good. The luxuries and benefits that befitted a conqueror race was theirs to enjoy and revel in. The alliance with the SSST Empire had made the kings of Asa more powerful than ever before, and had permitted the people of Asa an opportunity to enjoy a richer style of life. But the power of the throne also made the life of the king more precarious. Treachery, lies, and deceit surrounded the king. Assassination plots, military coups, and alien invasions were the everyday matters of the king. The prince was expected to plot for his father's demise. Distant brothers and illegitimate children pretended to the throne kingship. King An watched the skies for enemy attack and peered carefully over his shoulder at relatives and members of the royal court. Such was the life of a king of Asa and such was the life of the elder king An. Seated in the royal court of the great An, serving as royal cupbearer, was his brother, the great Al-Shar. Assisting in the governing of the empire, the great Al-Shar served faithfully under his brother, the great elder king. Peace reigned, the empire prospered, until an outbreak of war in the Central Stars. A series of major conflicts, known as the Galactic Great Wars, drew both the Aryan Empire and the Empire of Asa into its folds. The great elder king was summoned to the palace of the SSST to render services as commander of the combined MK and DK warriors. Great Al-Shar, acting on behalf of King An, remained behind in the Asa palace. Seeing an opportunity to betray his brother, Prince Al-Shar decided to seize control of the central Asa forces. The successful coup compelled the prince to further action. He immediately dispatched an elite troop of assassins to hunt down and take the life of the elder king. Historical documents would tell of the death in battle of the great An, the hero king who gave his life while in command of his armies. But those who were in the court of Asa-Ur knew why the king had died and who was responsible. Prince Al-Shar, royal cupbearer, was now King Al-Al. Lord Prince Anshar, son of the hero king An, and heir apparent, was captured and placed into exile by the new king of Asa-Ur, his claim to the throne stripped away forever. To ensure his personal safety, the great king Al-Al made the grandson of the great An his own personal cupbearer. Deposed Prince Anu was both hostage and servant to his king and uncle. Revenge would have to wait. For now he would serve faithfully, but he would learn. Someday the throne of Asa-Ur would be his. This he vowed. In this time, yet another significant event would occur, one which would change forever the fate of the ninth sector. A new star was beginning to mature, its young worlds cooling down to form inhabitable planets. King Al-Al, recognizing a potential for untapped precious ores and the possibility of a strategic military outpost, immediately sent a trusted and faithful administrator to lay claim to the new solar system. Lord Al-Al-Im, master of Genesis sciences, had an imposing task before him: to colonize and develop a primitive planetary system. The young sun had originally formed with only 2 worlds in orbit around it, one tiny inner planet, now known as Mercury, and one larger planet, its name to eventually be Tiamat. In time, 6 more worlds would form. One pair of inner worlds, Venus and Mars, 2 central giants, Jupiter and Saturn, and a pair of twin planets, Neptune and Uranus. But it was Tiamat, the tropical world, that would be the first planet developed by Lord Al-Al-Im in his assignment. Already inhabited by settlers of numerous galactic star systems, Tiamat was both a paradise and a frontier world of danger. The presence of an Asa-Ur military contingency force and a direct link to King Al-Al and the Empire of Arian was welcomed by the colonists and their families. Protection and necessary supplies would now be available. Tiamat would become a full-fledged world. Lord Al-Al-Im began to immediately exploit the new solar system. The sun was called Bod, where death is. In the immediate proximity of the young sun was the tiniest world, christened Mu, firstborn traveler. The next world would become a military outpost. Though possessed of super hot surface temperatures, its inner caverns gave comfortable shelter for the Iku and Bay forces. This world would become known as Dak Amu, place of the dock inside. The Red Sands planet, next in line, was a world with air and water, trees, and an environment suitable for settlers to inhabit. A good site for colonists, it also provided a much-needed surface land for a central military fortress. This was the world of Dak Mu, place of the dock. Beyond the Red Sands world was Tiamat, the center of the colonization efforts of Lord Al-Al-Im. The largest of the system's worlds was a gigantic planet possessing gravitational forces that made it unsuitable for habitation, but excellent for the production of supermetals. Under supergravity conditions, metals could be forged into combinations impossible on other worlds. Barbaru, it was called, world of metal metals. The second Titan world was the most dangerous. Internal forces were highly unstable. possessing a constant cloud of dust and rocks circling around its furiously spinning center, and with gravitational forces that pulled many ships into an uncorrectable spin, the giant would be known as Tar-Galu, the Great Destroyer. Of all the planets, the ringed one would prove the most dangerous. A distant past Tar-Galu was a large, cold swamp planet. A distance past Tar-Galu was a large, cold swamp planet, poisonous gases in its skies. Shahnama would be difficult to colonize, but would be ideal for Genesis experiments. The outermost world was called Iru, a near twin to Shahnama in size. Iru was a watery world with a misty covering. Though the task was difficult, Lord Al-Alim would prove successful. The extremely high gravity forces on Barbaru simplified the manufacture of heavy metals, unstable in an environment with low gravity. Military outposts on Dakamu and Dakmu provided secure and strong. Experimental farms on both Shahnama and Iru showed promise. The settlements on the moons of Barbaru and Tar-Galu were also thriving. But Tiamat was the crowning glory to the efforts of Al-Alim. With the support of his king Al-Al back home, the administrator was able to develop Tiamat into a paradise far beyond expectation. Facilities to extract newly discovered ores were constructed. Atmospheric conditioning centers soon began the tedious task of transforming the skies into a more and more suitable environment. As a source of precious ores and a strategic control point of traffic on the 9th Passageway star lanes, the new system further strengthened the stranglehold King Al-Al had on the outer 9th sector. As his final project, Lord Al-Alim constructed a nearly perfect duplicate of the palace of the Asa-Ur kings. Known as Ki, its name literally meant in the likeness of. The new solar system of Bad had been conquered. In recognition of the efforts of Al-Alim, the system was called Aridu, the mastered place, and its lord was Al-Alim, the Engi, lord of the world in the likeness of Asa-Ur. Okay, I think that's enough for tonight. But I'd like to continue this story in another chapter. Hopefully, maybe in the next week or so, especially if you all are enjoying this audiobook version, I suppose, of the Terra Papers. Just felt like it needed to be done, or it feels like it might be helpful to some of you all that may, like me, enjoy books on tape. And so anyway, all right. Thank you all for joining. As always, love you all so much. And sending love and hugs to you wherever you are, whenever you are. And I look forward to doing this again in the near future. Much love. Take care.